Okay, so let's take a look at the answers to our temperatures mid-unit summative. For this first page, for the most part, you just need to check your answers and you can highlight them, you can mark them on the page. These are pretty much straight definitions, vocabulary ideas, concepts. There's one question I am going to go over that I think needs a little bit of explanation. That's number 25. So at this point, you can just pause this and mark the correct answers on your sheet. So let's take a look at question number 25, which needs a little bit of explanation so that we have the understanding that we need. So which one of the following is true about this diagram? Well, here we've got the Earth, and we can see here's our tilt, and N represents the northern hemisphere. And here is the sun. Well, we can see that the northern hemisphere is tilted away from the sun in this diagram. Well, what does that mean? First of all, we can see that. We can see it's tilted away from the sun. So we know that answer is true. But we want to keep reading all of the choices in a multiple choice question. This would represent the winter solstice for the northern hemisphere. Remember, a solstice, a winter solstice specifically, is when you're tilted most away from the sun. So B is a direct result of A. It would be the first day of winter for the northern hemisphere. Definitely true, because that's what the winter solstice is, the first day of winter. This would be the shortest day of the year for the northern hemisphere. Well, that's also true, because when you're pointing away from the sun the most, you get the least amount of sunlight and you have your shortest day in the year. So for number 25, the answer definitely has to be E. All of the above. Now let's take a look at this second page, which I'm going to go through question by question just to make sure that we have the understanding. So true or false? Boston receives the same amount of sunlight as Astoria. Remember that the amount of sunlight you get is directly determined by your latitude, or how far away you are from the equator. We can see in this, Astoria and Boston are at about the same latitude, so that's true that they get the same amount of sunlight. Savannah and San Diego would change temperatures the same. Well, San Diego is west coast, Savannah is east coast. And we should know that the opposite coast, even though they're both on the water, they have very distinctly different changes in temperatures between seasons. So that is definitely false. Minot, North Dakota, is likely to be hotter than Astoria in the summer. Well, they get the same sunlight because they're at the same latitude. So they're both getting the same amount of sunlight. Who's going to be hotter? The difference is this one's on the coast. This guy here is way away from the water. But we know that if you're away from the water, you're going to get hotter and colder easier than a place that is in the water. So in the summertime, this part of the country, Minot, is going to get very, very hot easily, whereas Astoria will not. So Minot is likely to be hotter than Astoria. That's very definitely true. Key West would change temperatures more than Savannah. Key West is here, Savannah is here. Now they're both on the water. The difference between these is that Savannah is a lot more north. And you know that the further north you go, the more you change temperatures between seasons. So Key West is south of Savannah, so it's going to change temperatures less, which makes that a false statement. Sunlight is more concentrated in San Diego than Astoria. You know that the closer you get to the equator, the more you go that direction, the more concentrated your sunlight is. San Diego is south of Astoria, so it is true that it will get more concentrated sunlight. Amarillo and San Diego will have approximately the same latitude. Yeah, and that's not a very straight line for me, but you can see they're about the same latitude, or about the same distance from the equator. That's true. Kearney would have a greater change in seasons than Savannah. Well, here's Kearney, which is way away from the water, versus Savannah, which is on the water. So that's definitely true that Kearney is going to change more than Savannah. But there's also a second reason. Kearney's more north than Savannah. So Kearney's going to change a lot more in the Savannah because of two reasons. One, it's away from the water, and two, because it's further north. So that is very definitely true. San Diego would be cooler in summer than Savannah. Now, this is that West Coast, East Coast thing. The East Coast changes a lot more than the West Coast. So to say that San Diego is going to be cooler in summer is true because San Diego is not going to get as hot as Savannah is because it doesn't change as much, doesn't get as hot in the summertime. Minot receives less concentrated sunlight than Kearney. Well, your concentration of sunlight depends upon how far north you are. The more north you go, the less concentrated your sunlight is. So it is true that Minot receives less concentrated sunlight than Kearney. Final question. Boston would be colder than Astoria in the winter. Well, here's that West Coast, East Coast. West Coast doesn't change as much, doesn't get as hot, doesn't get as cold as the East Coast. That means in the wintertime, Boston gets colder, but in the summertime, it gets hotter than Astoria. So Boston would be colder than Astoria in winter is very definitely true. Now for this next section, we've got the diagram of the Earth going around the sun and its tilt as it's moving around the sun. Which letter represents the summer solstice? Well, that's when are you tilted most towards the sun? And we're tilted towards the sun right here at B. We're leaning into the sun versus here where we're leaning away. The start of winter has got to be D because here we're pointing out this direction and the sun's over here. So we're leaning away from the sun. That's the start of our winter. Now, as the Earth moves from D to A, the season in Georgia is, well, if this starts winter, that means this is winter, 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 winter until we get to this day here, which changes to spring. So all the way from B to A is going to be winter. Which of the following could possibly be the month for position 3? So here's 3. I know that this is summer because I'm leaned into the sun. We already said this starts winter. Well, after winter must be spring. After summer, before winter must be fall. So position 3 is sometime after that day when fall starts. Which one of these months is a day or a month in fall? It's got to be October. Which letter represents the first day of spring for the USA? That's going to be letter A, because if that's winter, that's summer, you know you start spring after winter as you're going towards summer. Which letter represents the vernal equinox for the northern hemisphere? You had to know or look up what that word vernal means. We have two equinoxes. We have a fall and a spring. The fall is called the autumnal equinox. The spring is also called the vernal equinox. So the vernal equinox in the northern hemisphere is that first day of spring. What season begins fall for the southern hemisphere? Well, remember that the southern hemisphere is opposite whatever the north is. So if we're looking for fall for the southern hemisphere, we're looking for spring for the north, which we just said was A. When the Earth is at position number 4, so the Earth is right here, we're sometime in fall, but we're not to winter yet. What season is it? It's fall. We started fall here, we start winter here. At position 4, we're going towards winter, but we're still in fall. We don't change to winter till we get to here. At which number does Georgia have the longest days? All right, so we're looking at 3, which is in the fall, 4, which is later in the fall, 6, which is winter just before we get into springtime, or 2. Well, it's got to be 2 because 2 is in the summer, and you know days are longest in the summer. Which of the following is true is in Georgia as the Earth moves from A to B. So here's A, first day of spring. B, first day of summer. As we go through spring, are the days getting shorter? Nope. You know that. The days are getting longer. Are temperatures increasing? Definitely. We know that in the springtime, we're starting to get enough sunlight that we start to warm up. Well, we know temperatures aren't going down in the spring. They can still be cold, but they're not going down from winter. There is little change in temperatures. Definitely not the case. We know that as we go through spring, we really start to notice a change in our temperature. So the answer there would have been B. If you have any questions about any of these questions or think your paper might have been scored incorrectly, please come see me at this time and we'll take a look at it.